I'm going to tell you something that should be impossible. While my body lay lifeless on that operating table, no heartbeat, no brain activity, clinically dead for 6 minutes, I watched the entire resuscitation from above. I saw the nurse with the birthmark shaped like Italy on her left shoulder blade drop a surgical clamp. I heard it hit the floor with a specific metallic ping that I can still recreate perfectly in my mind. I watched her quickly kick it under the supply cart with her right foot, glancing around to see if anyone noticed. 3 days later, when I woke up and told her what I'd seen, she went pale. She asked me how I could possibly know. The clamp was still there, beneath that cart. She'd been too embarrassed to mention it. But here's what haunts me more than that impossible detail. I'm a neurosurgeon. For 23 years, I've opened human skulls and held the organ that supposedly creates consciousness. I've given lectures debunking NDEs as hallucinations, oxygen-starved neurons firing randomly, producing dreams that desperate people mistake for heaven. I was wrong about everything. Before that February morning, my life was built on certainty, facts, evidence, peer-reviewed studies. I'd published 47 papers on brain trauma. I'd saved hundreds of lives by understanding the mechanics of the human brain better than most people on this planet. And I'd done it all while maintaining one core belief. When you die, you simply stop existing. Consciousness ends. The lights go out. Nothing follows. My wife used to ask me what I thought happened after death. The same thing that happened before you were born, I'd say. Absolute nothing. And that's okay. She'd look at me with this sadness I never fully understood. Don't you want there to be more? She'd ask. I'd shake my head. Wanting doesn't make it real. I wasn't depressed about this. I found it liberating, actually. No judgment. No cosmic scoreboard. Just this one life to live as well as possible. Then, peaceful oblivion. The aneurysm hit me during morning rounds. I remember standing at a patient's bedside, explaining post-operative care, when I felt something shift inside my skull. Not pain at first, just a wrongness. Like a light bulb filament about to snap. Then came the pressure. A balloon inflating behind my right eye, expanding with each heartbeat. I reached for the bed rail. The sound came next. A wet pop, deep inside my head. I've heard that sound before, in other people's brains during surgery. I knew exactly what it meant. A blood vessel had burst. My own artery was hemorrhaging into my brain. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick, useless. The room tilted. I could smell something metallic. My own blood filling spaces it was never meant to occupy. My legs disappeared first. Not numb. Just gone, like they'd been deleted from existence. I watched the floor rush up to meet my face. Felt the cold linoleum against my cheek. The pain arrived then. Imagine a railroad spike driven through your eye socket, white hot, twisting. Every heartbeat sent fresh agony pulsing through my skull. I could hear my colleagues shouting, distant, underwater. Someone rolled me over. The fluorescent lights above seared my retinas. I wanted to close my eyes, but my eyelids wouldn't respond. They rushed me to surgery, my own operating room. I remember the bizarre awareness that I might die in the same place where I'd saved so many others. Poetic, maybe. Terrifying, absolutely. The last thing I remember before going under was the anesthesiologist, David, a guy I'd worked with for a decade, leaning over me. "We've got you, John," he said. His breath smelled like coffee and mint gum. I tried to tell him about the clamp protocol for arterial bleeding, but the propofol took me before I could form the words. And then I died. The transition wasn't dramatic. No tunnel, no immediate light. Just a sudden absence of pain so profound it felt like waking up after years of carrying something impossibly heavy. I opened my eyes, or whatever passes for eyes when you don't have a body, and I was floating near the ceiling. I could see everything with impossible clarity. My own body on the table, chest cracked open, Dr. Sarah's hands working inside my ribcage. The monitors showing flat lines. The organized chaos of a trauma team fighting to restart a heart that had given up. But here's what struck me. I felt nothing looking at that body. No fear. No attachment. It was like looking at a car I used to drive. Useful once, now broken. No longer mine. I should have been terrified. I should have been fighting to get back. Instead, I felt curious. Peaceful. I watched Sarah massage my heart manually, her face tight with concentration. I watched the rhythm she used. Compress, release, compress, release. I noticed sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool operating room air. That's when the nurse dropped the clamp. I saw it happen in perfect detail. She'd been reaching for the suction tube, her hand trembling slightly. She was new, I realized, maybe only a few months on this team. The clamp slipped from the surgical tray. That metallic ping, her eyes going wide, the quick kick under the cart, the glance around. No one else had noticed. They were too focused on saving my life. I remember thinking, I need to remember this. Somehow, I knew I'd need proof later. Then, I became aware of something else in the room. A presence. No, multiple presences. Like peripheral vision, but for consciousness. I couldn't see them directly, but I felt them gathering, waiting. One of them felt familiar in a way that made my non-existent chest ache with recognition. And then, I was moving. Not flying. That's too physical. It was more like the room, the hospital, the entire physical world was receding. Or, I was expanding beyond it. The boundaries between me and everything else started dissolving. I could feel the thoughts of everyone in that operating room. Sarah's determination mixed with grief. We'd been friends for years. David's hands shaking as he administered drugs to a colleague instead of a patient. The new nurse's secret shame about the dropped clamp. I felt all of it, simultaneously, without judgment. The light came gradually. At first, I thought it was the OR lights brightening. But this light didn't hurt. It didn't come from a source. It was everywhere and nowhere. Golden, warm, alive. If you've ever stood in a forest in early autumn when the sun breaks through the leaves and shafts, creating that honey-colored glow, it was like being inside that warmth, that safety, that perfect moment stretched into eternity. And the light was conscious. I know how that sounds. Believe me, the neurosurgeon part of my brain was still trying to catalog this as a hallucination. Oxygen deprivation, DMT release, temporal lobe seizures. But those explanations felt like trying to describe the ocean as wet molecules. Technically accurate, completely missing the point. The light knew me. Not my name, not my accomplishments, not the surface details. It knew the me beneath all that. Every thought I'd ever had, every secret shame, every moment of kindness I'd hidden, every flash of cruelty I'd justified. And it loved me anyway. Completely. Unconditionally. I've never felt anything like it. The best approximation I can give you. Imagine being a child who's been lost in the dark for hours, terrified, alone. Then your mother finds you, sweeps you up, holds you against her chest, and you feel her heartbeat and smell her skin and hear her voice saying, I've got you, you're safe now. Multiply that feeling by infinity. That was the light. But here's what shattered me. I realized I'd felt this before. Not in some past life or mystical experience. I'd felt this presence my entire existence. Every moment of my life, this loving consciousness had been there, watching, hoping I'd notice. And I'd been too busy, too rational, too convinced I knew better to ever feel it. I wanted to weep, but I had no tears. I wanted to apologize, but the light communicated that no apology was needed. It had never judged me. It had only loved me, even when I denied its existence. The garden appeared next. I don't know if it was a place or a state of consciousness, but I perceived it as a garden. Rolling hills of grass so green, it seemed lit from within. Flowers I'd never seen on Earth. Colors that don't exist in our spectrum. I could smell them. Honey and cinnamon and fresh rain and my grandmother's perfume all blended together. Others were there. I couldn't see them clearly. They were like shapes made of light, different densities of consciousness. But I recognized one immediately. My father. He died when I was 19, and I'd spent 25 years convinced he'd simply ceased to exist. Now, here he was, more alive than I'd ever seen him. His presence communicated without words. Pride, joy, welcome home. I tried to ask him questions. Where are we? What is this? How is this possible? But the questions dissolved before I could form them. The answers were already present, embedded in the experience itself. We were in a place that existed beyond space, a moment stretched beyond time. This was where we'd always been, beneath the surface of physical reality. We'd never actually left. We'd just forgotten. Then came the part that changed everything. The garden faded. The presence I'd identified as my father stepped back. And I was suddenly witnessing my life, but not like watching a movie. I was living it again. Every moment, every interaction, every choice. But here's the thing that no description of NDEs ever captures properly. I wasn't just re-experiencing my own perspective. I was experiencing everything from the perspective of everyone I'd ever encountered. The first memory hit me. I was 7 years old, making fun of a kid named Marcus on the playground. He had a speech impediment. I'd mimicked his stutter in front of other kids to get a laugh. I remembered feeling clever, powerful even, in that moment. Now I felt what Marcus felt. The shame that burned in his stomach. The betrayal. He'd thought I was his friend. The way that moment embedded itself in his psyche. A tiny seed of self-doubt that would grow for decades. I felt him lying in bed that night, replaying the incident, feeling worthless. I felt his mother's concern when he became quiet at dinner. I felt the long-term impact, how he became afraid to speak up in class, how he developed anxiety, how one casual cruelty from me rippled through years of his life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to undo it. The empathy was total, complete, unavoidable. This wasn't intellectual understanding. I was him, feeling what he felt, living with the wound I'd inflicted. Then another moment. I was in medical school, exhausted from a double shift. A homeless man asked me for help outside the hospital. I'd walked past him without making eye contact, mumbling about being late. I remembered feeling justified. I was tired. I had studying to do. I couldn't help everyone. Now I felt his experience. The hope that flickered when he saw my doctor's coat. The crushing disappointment when I didn't even look at him. The reinforcement of his belief that he was invisible, worthless, less than human. I felt his hunger, his chronic pain from an untreated infection, his loneliness, and I felt how one moment of eye contact, one moment of being seen as a person, would have sustained him for days. I'd robbed him of that with my indifference. On and on it went. Hundreds of interactions, thousands, every careless word. Every time I'd been short with my wife because I was stressed. Every time I'd been dismissive of a nurse's suggestion because I assumed I knew better. Every patient I'd treated as a case rather than a person. The pain was overwhelming. Not because I was being punished. The light's love never wavered. But because I finally understood. Every action creates ripples. Every choice affects the whole. We're not separate individuals bumping against each other randomly. We're intimately connected. When I hurt someone, I hurt myself. When I heal someone, I heal myself. But the review wasn't all painful. I experienced a moment when I'd stayed late to hold the hand of a dying patient who had no family. I'd sat with her for hours, talking to her, making sure she wasn't alone. Now I felt what she felt, the profound comfort, the way my presence transformed her terror into peace, the gratitude that transcended words. I felt her soul's joy as she transitioned, and I felt how my simple act of compassion had helped her. I experienced a time when I'd mentored a struggling medical student everyone else had written off. I'd seen potential in her and spent extra time teaching her. Now I felt her side, how my belief in her had rekindled her own self-belief, how she'd gone on to become an excellent surgeon, saving hundreds of lives, how my one choice to invest in her had rippled out across decades and countless other people. I felt every act of kindness I'd ever performed, often ones I'd forgotten. Small moments, holding a door, offering a genuine smile to someone having a bad day, listening without judgment. Each one had mattered more than I'd known. The message became crystal clear. This is what matters. This is all that matters. Not your accomplishments, not your knowledge, not your money or status or publications. The only thing that survives death is how you made others feel. The love you gave, the compassion you showed, the healing you offered. I'd spent 23 years as a neurosurgeon, thinking I was helping people by fixing their brains. And I had helped. I'd saved lives. But I'd missed the deeper healing that happens through simple human connection. I'd been so focused on the mechanics of the brain that I'd ignored the soul. Then, I felt a pulling sensation. Gentle but insistent. Like a tide turning. I understood without words. I had to go back. My time wasn't finished. There was still work to do, lessons to learn, love to give. Part of me wanted to argue. I'd found home. Why would I leave? But a deeper part understood. This place would always be here. This love would always be waiting. But the physical world was where growth happened, where souls learned through experience, where love became action. The garden faded. My father's presence withdrew with a feeling I can only describe as, "See you soon." The light began to recede, though I understood now it wasn't really receding. I was just becoming less able to perceive it. The pain hit me like a sledgehammer. Suddenly I was back in my body, and every nerve ending was screaming. My chest was on fire. I couldn't breathe. Something was down my throat. Hands were pressing on me, voices shouting, the fluorescent light stabbing my eyes. I tried to leave again. This felt unbearable after the peace I'd experienced, but I couldn't. I was locked back in, anchored to flesh and bone and pain. Someone was calling my name. Sarah. Her face appeared above me, tears streaming. "John, stay with us. Stay with us." I tried to speak around the breathing tube, but couldn't. I tried to convey with my eyes. "I'm here. I came back." The next few days were a blur of ICU recovery, but I remembered everything. The clarity didn't fade like a dream. If anything, it became more vivid, more real than the hospital room around me. When I was finally stable enough, I told Sarah about the dropped clamp, about watching from above, about the nurse's birthmark. She listened with a doctor's skepticism, the same skepticism I would have had a week earlier. But when we checked and found the clamp still under that cart exactly where I'd described, when the nurse confirmed her birthmark, when every detail checked out, Sarah's face changed. "How?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer that would satisfy a scientific mind. I still don't. That was 4 years ago. I still practice neurosurgery, but everything has changed. I touch my patients differently now. I look them in the eyes. I sit with their families and really listen. I understand that healing isn't just about technical skill. It's about recognizing the soul in every person I encounter. I spend time with my wife in ways I never did before. Not big dramatic gestures, but presence, attention, seeing her. Every conversation feels precious, because I understand now how our energy affects each other, how my love or indifference ripples through her experience. I volunteer at a homeless shelter every week. I think about that man I walked past, and I make sure no one is invisible to me anymore. I'm not afraid of death. How could I be? I've been there. It's not an ending. It's a homecoming. But I'm not rushing toward it either. Because I finally understand what this life is for. We're here to learn love. That's it. That's the whole curriculum. Every challenge, every difficult person, every moment of pain or joy, they're all opportunities to choose love over fear, connection over separation, compassion over judgment. And here's what I know now with absolute certainty. We never actually die. We can't. Consciousness doesn't end when the brain stops. The brain is more like a radio receiving a signal than a generator creating consciousness. When the radio breaks, the signal continues. We continue. You are not your body. You are not your brain. You are not even your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath all of that. Eternal, indestructible, intimately connected to everyone and everything else. One day, your body will stop working. Your heart will beat its final beat. Your neurons will fire for the last time. And you will discover what I discovered. That you're finally, fully awake. That you're home. That you always were. But until that day comes, you have this precious gift. A physical life. A chance to learn, to grow, to love. Don't waste it the way I almost did. Accumulating accomplishments while missing the point. Don't wait for your own near-death experience to realize what matters. See people. Really see them. Make them feel valued. Choose kindness even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. Because one day, you'll experience every interaction from both sides, and you'll want to be proud of how you made others feel. This life is a crucible. A temporary classroom where souls come to learn what can only be learned through experience. And the final exam has only one question. How well did you love? I used to fear death. Now I know there's nothing to fear. But I've learned to love life in a way I never did before. Because I finally understand how precious, how purposeful, how perfect this temporary journey really is. Every moment matters. Every person matters. You matter. And we're all going home eventually. To that garden. To that light. To that love that has no conditions and no end.